The shadow did not move when I did. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that makes you aware of every small detail you would normally ignore. I started noticing it about 3 weeks ago. My room has one window facing the street. The lamp outside throws a pale orange glow through the curtains each night, and that glow has always cast my shadow against the far wall. Familiar, predictable, the kind of thing you stop seeing after years of living somewhere. But then I actually looked at it one night. My shadow stretched further than it should have. Not slightly further, dramatically further, reaching past the wall and bleeding across the floor in a direction no light source in that room could logically produce. I told myself I was tired. I told myself it was nothing. Evidence that refuses to support the comfortable story you're desperately trying to believe. Just a small journal I kept on my nightstand, something to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. Night 3. Shadow stretches northeast, reaching toward the bed at roughly a 45-degree angle. No streetlight outside sits at that position. Checked twice. Night 4. It moved again. Same direction. Always toward where I sleep. I told myself it was the streetlights filtering through uneven curtains. I told myself my exhausted brain was pattern matching in the dark, finding shapes the way children find animals in clouds. Perfectly reasonable explanations for a perfectly reasonable person. But I kept writing things down anyway. And whatever it was thinking about, I was certain it involved me lying there, completely unaware, every single night before this one. Living inside it was something else entirely. I started lying awake deliberately, keeping perfectly still, watching it from the corner of my eye. And that is when I noticed the delay. Half a second, maybe less, but enough. I would shift my arm slowly to the left, and the shadow would follow, but not immediately. It would pause, just briefly, like it was deciding whether to bother matching me at all. At first, I told myself it was my perception, my exhausted brain misfiring signals, confusing the sequence of things. So I tested it. Small movements, a finger lift, a slow head turn. I was so certain. Around 2 in the morning, something inside me simply refused to keep lying there, watching, waiting, pretending this was something I could sleep through. My hands were shaking when I finally sat up and reached for the lamp on my nightstand. Click. Then the second lamp across the room. Click. Then the overhead light, the harsh one I never use because it makes everything feel clinical and cold. Click. I grabbed my phone next and switched on the flashlight, holding it out like a weapon. 4 separate light sources blazing simultaneously, turning my bedroom into something closer to an operating room than a place of rest. Every corner exposed, every surface washed completely white with brightness. I stood in the center of it all, breathing hard, heart hammering, absolutely certain that flooding the room this completely would finally dissolve whatever I had been seeing into nothing. But it was more real than anything I had ever seen. The overhead light flooded the ceiling. My phone flashlight pointed directly at the wall where it always gathered. The room was saturated, almost painfully bright, the kind of brightness that makes your eyes water and forces you to squint. There was nowhere for darkness to exist anymore. And yet, the shadow remained, not fading, not retreating towards some forgotten corner I had missed, not dissolving the way shadows are supposed to when you eliminate every possible source of darkness surrounding them. It was becoming darker. I simply stood there, staring at something that should not exist, feeling the architecture of my understanding quietly collapse around me. Every light in the room blazed at full intensity, yet the shadow remained, somehow denser, more absolute than anything darkness alone could produce. I stood there running through everything I understood about physics, about light, about the basic rules of reality I had accepted since childhood. Shadows require darkness. They are the absence of light. They cannot exist when every surface is saturated with brightness from multiple directions simultaneously. That is not opinion. That is fundamental truth. Yet the shape before me violated every single one of those rules without hesitation, without apology. It was darker than darkness itself. darker than closing your eyes in a windowless room at midnight. A darkness that felt manufactured, intentional, alive. They had always known, not gradually, not subtly. One moment the shadow held my general shape, and the next the fingers were wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. I held my hands up, spreading them wide in the blazing light. 5 fingers on each hand. Normal, human, mine. But the shadow's hands told a different story entirely. The fingers were elongated, stretched far beyond any natural proportion, each one separating from the others, like they were peeling away from something they had been forced to hold together. It was not responding to me because it was not mine. It never moved with me. It moved around me, through the shape of me, wearing my outline the way something wears a borrowed coat. The shadow did not follow. Its fingers kept moving, curling inward, reaching toward the bed with a patience that felt almost tender, almost hungry. I tried again, this time lifting both hands, spreading my fingers wide, making myself impossible to misread. My hands were clearly mine, clearly moving, clearly real. The shadow fingers continued their independent crawl, unbothered, unconnected, as though my movements were simply irrelevant to whatever it was doing. That was the moment the last rational explanation collapsed inside me. A shadow is nothing more than the absence of light shaped by a body. It has no will. It has no direction it chooses on its own. But this thing on my wall had both. My mind won't stop pulling at the edges of this thing, unraveling every thread, trying to find where it begins. Was it always there? Was it never mine to begin with? Something ancient and patient wearing my shape like borrowed clothing, moving just close enough to convincing that I never questioned it. Or was there a specific moment, a Tuesday, a Thursday, some ordinary forgettable evening when the real one simply vanished and this replacement slid into its place without a single sound? I keep reaching back through memory trying to find the seam, the exact second where something shifted. Nothing surfaces, no dramatic moment, no warning. And that terrifies me more than anything else standing in this blazing room right now. Because if I cannot identify when it happened, if there is no clear before and after, then maybe it has always been this. Maybe I never had a real shadow at all. How many nights did I sleep peacefully while something studied me from inches away, patient, deliberate, and completely invisible in plain sight? 3 weeks ago, I woke up certain someone was standing over my bed. I told myself it was sleep paralysis. 2 weeks ago, I kept waking before my alarm, feeling hollowed out, like something had been quietly draining me through the night. I blamed stress, poor sleep, too much caffeine. But the cold, that is what stops me cold right now. Those fingertips, thin, impossibly cold, trailing across my shoulder in the dark. I always convinced myself I had imagined it, that half-conscious minds manufacture sensation from nothing. They were not imagined. It was claiming, not gently, not hesitantly, but with the quiet certainty of something returning to what it already owed. And that is when I saw it properly for the first time. The shape on the bed was not wrinkled sheets or a bunched blanket. It was me. A perfect dark impression of my body, my exact proportions, my specific way of sleeping with one arm tucked beneath, knees slightly bent. Every detail rendered in shadow so precise it looked carved. But I was standing across the room. I was watching. The realization arrived not as a single thought, but as a collapse. Every rational defense I had built over weeks crumbling simultaneously, and I had lost mine. Every light in the room blazed without mercy, and still it lay there, perfectly still, perfectly dark, perfectly settled into the shape of me. I stood watching it for what felt like hours. Then the silence became something else, something that pressed against my ears and made the air feel thin. I looked down. The floor beneath my feet was completely bare. Light poured across every inch of it, uninterrupted, untouched, reaching past me as though I simply was not there. No shadow stretched behind me. No darkness gathered at my heels. Nothing reached back. I I raised my hand slowly. The floor showed nothing. The lights blazed all around me, honest and indifferent, illuminating everything